it's a 24 race calendar now, and as you say, there's 4 races in the States, 3 of which are pretty much street layout. And I don't really understand why that's happening either. You've got Laguna Seca, which is a phenomenal circuit and more akin to kind of, a proper race circuit. And yet we're building circuits in cities. It just doesn't really, for me, fit.
The sprint race is still very much up for debate. Jury's still massively out on them.
Yeah.
We've had a few good ones, kind of towards the back end actually last season. But overall, I mean, the drivers have been very vocal about not loving the sprint race. Hello and welcome to On Track GP. This morning it is just 2 of us. It's just 2 of us in here.
It is just 2 of us.
Usually it's a packed studio.
Yeah, I thought I was expecting to see Joe.
I know, Joe and Matisse. It's just the 2 of us. But I am very lucky because we do have a very special guest this morning. It is none other than Steve Harrison. Lovely to see you. You might recognise Steve from Who's in the Car.
Yeah. A little bit different.
A little bit different. Nice to see you with the helmet off.
Briefly saw you in Who's in the Car.
Yes, we were discussing before we started the pod that I had a DNF in the car because someone came and ran right into the back of me, and I did question Steve to see if it was him. It turns out it wasn't. It was Rich.
We cleared that up. Nice and early. It wasn't me. Nice
and early. So yes, you might recognise Steve from that. Obviously, you are a professional racer, aren't you?
I feel like I'd be...
blow your own trumpet, go on.
Yeah, somewhat significantly blow my own trumpet. In saying professional, I think that's kind of stretch in a way. But no, I race. I do race in club motorsport at the moment. Sort of future ambitions to change that from kind of, I guess you'd say, amateur racing really to maybe a professional seat. But I've been involved in motorsport since I can remember, to be honest, in one way or another.
How did you get into racing then? Was it karting when you were younger and
kind of sort of the common route really. So my dad was into motorsport, raced himself. So when I was young, used to sort of travel around the country. He raced endurance karts, so twin engine Honda endurance karts, with my uncle and one of his sort of best friends, and they were Midland kart champions 2 years running. And then when I sort of got big enough to reach the pedals, had a go myself. Fell in love with it from there, and yeah, sort of the rest was history, to be honest. But yeah, it was good fun.
So as you were saying before, that you'd like to kind of progress further in karting. So how do you go about that? If you've been doing a certain type of, I guess, semi-professional racing, you could say, how do you then manage to get into the other side? Yeah,
well, I mean, I think with motorsport, you've kind of got, maybe one of a few different avenues to get into sort of a professional seat or a professional drive. Pretty much everybody starts off in karting and migrates from there. My sort of karting journey didn't even really start, to be honest, as a junior. Family circumstances changed that. There wasn't the funding available for me to sort of look at going down a route where I could have been spotted. And there was sort of a long hiatus in my life where I didn't actually race at all. So, and then sort of later on in life, after I'd sort of developed a professional career, I guess my sort of working career, had that money to then go and invest in it and do some more karting, find out that I was pretty competitive, and then sort of look at a route into getting into sort of tin top motorsport, which is where I am now. So I think if you're not in a position to get spotted as a junior in karts, it's around sponsorship, around partnerships, and then around getting in the right place at the right time.
It's massively money orientated, isn't it, when it comes to racing or karting, or trying to get into any type of motorsport. And from what I'm aware of, there isn't really like a scholarship kind of scheme or program, and that would be amazing though if F1 or all these junior, I guess, karting agencies, if they had something that can allow kids who obviously dream a bit. I know there's only 20 drivers on a grid, but there is something that can allow kids who probably are really talented as well, but just can't afford the upkeep of trying to stay in motorsport. Do you think that's something that maybe for the future there will be, or you just think it's a closed book?
No, 100%. I think what's nice to see is those drivers who've had the opportunity, whether it be coming from an affluent background. So, for instance, it's quite well known, Lando, for instance, has had a huge financial backing throughout his career, but obviously talented driver. has been involved in launching his own sort of karting opportunities. Daniel Ricciardo, I think, has done the same thing. So it's nice to see drivers sort of investing in junior platforms. But yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's a wide enough sort of catchment for those young drivers to get into open wheel racing who perhaps don't have the natural financial backing for it.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that actually you don't see that, you know, in the sport at the minute. But hopefully it is something that will change over time. And as you said, you know, you've got these drivers that are, you know, current and on the grid trying to back and trying to build something for the future for these drivers, because it just feels a little bit unfair that it's only kind of like the 1% that can afford to put their kids, you know, through that may or may not make it. And I just think that maybe it should be a little bit broader, but maybe that's because, you know, the sport is growing massively, which we've seen over the last couple of years. It's just absolutely taken off. It's insane. And in that way that it's been insane is that how many more circuits that we're seeing, especially in America. Yeah. Have you been lucky enough to try any of these American circuits? What's your favourite circuit?
No, I mean, yeah, certainly not live. My uncle actually works for a sort of an asphalt firm and heavy machinery. Actually, his company was involved in building Circuit of the Americas.
Wow.
So he got the opportunity, I think, to go around there when it was built. I haven't had the fortune of doing that. But no, I think circuits like like Texas are amazing. I'm less of a fan of where we've sort of converted the Miami Dolphins Stadium into a race circuit. I'll be honest. I'm a bit more purist. I enjoy sort of the old gravel trap and sort of classical layout. But like you said, catchment's huge in the state. So, you know, Vegas, which...
Did you like Vegas?
I thought the race was good.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Didn't like the show?
I didn't particularly like the show. I think it was very much rushed and shoehorned. I mean, hundreds of millions pounds spent. I doubt it paid it back. But maybe in, you know, future years, because it's like, how long have they got the deal for? Is it 5 years, Vegas, or is it even longer?
I think it's quite a long stretch of time.
So
they wouldn't have invested so much into it if it wasn't
not
for a substantial period.
So it'd be interesting to see what happens next time. I'm less keen on hearing that. I want to say, is it Chicago's got potentially a deal for maybe doing a street circuit?
I mean, we've already got 4, haven't we? 4 American circuits that's up and coming, which it's kind of annoying because it's taking away a little bit from, you know, the European tracks, which are the bread and butter, and also kind of like the South American tracks. We absolutely love to see that.
Exactly.
We've spoken about it so many times on these sofas that we'd love to see South Africa as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And it just seems like we're going where the money is, of course. Vegas is until 2032, so long time, that one. We're going where the money is in terms of the Middle East. You know, we've got Bahrain, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, you know, and then you move over to the other side, and then you've got all these American tracks. So that takes up pretty much half your races. Yeah. It's just a shame, isn't it? Because for us who, you know, have grown up with F1 and like you said, like the purists, you want to be seeing the iconic tracks and not seeing, you know, them have to fall to the wayside to make room for all these like monetary tracks. But because of Drive to Survive and the money that is bringing into F1 and the expansion, I mean, I think the interest went up over 400% in America alone, you know, from Drive to Survive. So F1, they're trying to make it less of a 1% sport. So in that sense, they have no choice but to go where the money is, isn't it? Yeah, which again, whether that opens up sort of younger American drivers who typically, you know, we haven't had very many American world champions. In fact, I think the only one from memory is Andretti, who's obviously trying to engage in the sport in a different way. Yeah. Kind of criminal, actually. I don't think he's been allowed to sort of follow that dream yet, anyway. Yeah. But no, I completely agree with you. I think you know, it's a 24 race calendar now, and as you say, there's 4 races in the States, 3 of which are pretty much street layout. And I don't really understand why that's happening either. You've got Laguna Seca, which is a phenomenal circuit and more akin to kind of, you know, a proper race circuit. And yet we're building circuits in cities. It just doesn't really, for me, fit what F1's truly all about. It's a bit more of the show now, isn't it? And then you're adding in like the sprint weekends and things like that. So it's just like, it's more drama. And that's what they want, because it makes a better documentary. It makes a better show for when Drive to Survive comes out, but not necessarily the quality of the race itself has improved. It's actually probably diminished a little bit. Yeah, and I think F1 needs to be quite careful with that, to be honest, because yes, there's a huge expansion commercially in F1, and we've seen that over the last few years.
but it's a fine balance between entertainment and sport. And for me, sport is entertainment. So if you get a proper, authentic sporting event, it's entertaining. Now, you can't guarantee that every race weekend's going to be, you know,
Exciting,
a showstopper and exciting. But for the moments you get that are authentic, there's nothing like them. And if you can apply that to other sports, I have no interest in darts whatsoever. But the Luke Littler story was incredible, you know.
And it draws you in because it's an organic story, and
exactly.
that's what I think all sport. Sometimes, you know, football as well. Probably maybe rugby is one of the only ones in cricket that I'd say is still kind of very authentic, very organic.
Yeah.
Because even though it has got money in it, it hasn't got the same level of money and wealth that F1 has in it, NFL has in it, football has in it, things like that. So I think that unfortunately where money corrupts everything, especially sport, that things are done, you know, across the board to try and make things more interesting or more talking points and you know, for more of television sales at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you see that with, and the drivers have been quite vocal about it on Drive to Survive, in that they'll take snippets of one part of the season and merge it with another to try and create a form of, and you know, rivalry or drama for that episode. And like I said, you can't argue with the exposure that it's given. But again, for those who are sort of focused and follow Formula One, you can tell when that's happening, and it kind of disengages that audience, but obviously engages those who've never had access to it before. So that's what I mean when I think about the balance. If the balance is right, Formula One's opportunities are kind of limitless. But if you pigeonhole it and we start just going to street circuits, and I still don't think we've figured out, and I don't think F1's figured out what sprint weekends are better and what aren't. You know, are they just cherry picking circuits they think action can, you know, materialise at, or is it a case of going, well, we're going to pick maybe 5 or 7, or it doesn't seem clear.
Yeah, I agree. I think the sprint race is still very much up for debate. Jury's still massively out on them.
Yeah.
We've had a few good ones, kind of towards the back end actually last season, but overall, I mean, the drivers have been very vocal about not loving the sprint race, especially Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about Max. I know you've got your Mercedes top on, and we're going to talk about Mercedes because obviously there's been breaking news in the last couple of weeks about them and Lewis.
For sure.
But in terms of Max, I mean, he's just had the most dominant. I mean, last season was a joke. He was so incredibly dominant. The season before was also brilliant from him. Yeah. I think that where Red Bull have just exceeded expectations, and they've been building and building for so long, do you think that Max and that Red Bull is going to have the same type of dominance this season? Or can you see the likes of Ferrari, the Astons, McLaren, Mercedes, even being able to challenge? Because we saw sometimes Ferrari match them in terms of, you know, a pace in some aspects, but over the course of a whole race, it's just not there.
No, I mean, I think Ferrari excited us a little bit over the last 2 years at having one lap pace. You know, Charles is phenomenally quick. The back end of last season, Carlos as well was sort of starting to match Charles in terms of pace. But unfortunately, they just don't have the consistency. They don't seem to be able to look after the car that's not kind to tyres. I'll be honest, and I hate to say this because there is that element where everyone loves Ferrari in some way or another. But even if they turned up with a complete package on the car, I wouldn't have faith in what happens behind the scenes for them to deliver a championship over 24 races.
I mean, that was always an issue, wasn't it, in terms of strategy? And then they kind of ripped out all the backroom staff, changed the team principle. And I'd say it was a little bit improved last season, but it still wasn't improved enough to be as, I don't know, regimented and, you know, on the ball as the likes of Red Bull. I've never seen a team perform in that sense, you know, in a pit.
No, 100%. I mean, Ferrari's a lot more about passion and the love for Ferrari, and that kind of can be beneficial one way, but it, like you say, it doesn't have that regimental organisation competitiveness. I think they're the only team on the radio I've ever heard say we're going to Plan F. Yeah, I mean, how the drivers keep up with that, I have absolutely no idea.
Like, what happened
Plan
to
A, Plan B. We've missed 3 different letters.
How long that has to be for you to get from A to F?
And the driver, how can you be there, you know, mid-race, doing 220 miles an hour, your engineer's saying go to Plan F.
Plan
and
F.
You're like, okay, which one was that? You know, we're putting mediums on this side and hards on this side, you know. It is crazy. But I mean, to your original question, do I think Red Bull will continue the domination? I think it's for the other teams to answer that question. No doubt in the last season, you know, Max and Red Bull were phenomenal as a package. And I think For everyone watching, whether you're mutual, whether you're a Mercedes fan, any driver fan, you had to admire the performance of last year. And to be fair, for them and their whole team, it was also a season where there was nothing controversial about it. Yeah. They just dominated. There wasn't the 2021, obviously, challenges and controversies there. There wasn't the cost cap discussions marring that championship. The sandwich gate. And they came out in that third year and they dominated. So, it's up to the other teams to go on a push. If I was guessing out of the sort of constructors we discussed who I think will be most likely, McLaren seemed to be on quite an aggressive curve of sort of performance development. If they could continue that over a season with the drivers they've got and the pairing they've got, I think Piastri and Norris are quite an exciting prospect. So.
Yeah, they were pretty exceptional. They had a rocky start to last season, but then came on so strong, and they were one of the only teams I felt could actually, challenge during a race properly to a Red Bull. Yeah. And great driver partnership that they've got there. Want to talk about Mercedes, because obviously in the last couple of weeks we have heard that Lewis Hamilton will be moving to Ferrari. Yeah. Not this season, so you've still got one more, but 2025 he will be at Ferrari, which is going to be a bit weird to see him in that gorgeous red suit. And red. I'm not even a Ferrari fan, I'm a Red Bull fan, but I love the red of Ferrari.
Of course, yeah.
It's going to be odd, but does that kind of show, I guess, where Mercedes are at, that kind of the belief maybe isn't there as much? He doesn't feel that he could go and win another title. He probably hasn't got that long left in the sport, but he doesn't have that faith in, I guess, Toto and the Mercedes team to get that car where it needs to be.
I mean, I don't know whether it be his faith placed in the likes of Toto and the team. I'm not sure. I mean, I didn't mention Mercedes. They're on a potential challenge for this year. I always hope that they can. And of course, I'd love to see Lewis go and get his 8th title. But I think, to be honest with you, surprised at the timing, yes. Surprised at the switch, a little bit less so. I think, yes, Mercedes haven't produced a competitive car over the last 2 years. They've taken one win, which was obviously Brazil 22. And then last year was even more challenging. I think the reasons for the decision, if I'm putting myself in Lewis's shoes, is okay, the car hasn't been competitive for 2 years, but what else has happened outside of that? So for the first time, I think you've really heard him be vocal around saying, this is what we need to do with this car, and then him coming out and saying, I haven't had that kind of response or sort of being listened to try and develop the car in the way he thinks it could get more competitive. What do we know? We know he was looking for a long-term deal. We know he wanted to be an ambassador for Mercedes. They've been the drivetrain supporter of him since he came out of karting.
It's a big decision to move.
Yeah, and I think in perhaps not getting that sort of I don't know what you'd call it, but collaboration or understanding on working on developing the car, on not getting that long-term ambassador type role for Mercedes, and then being at sort of the twilight years of your career and going, I want that 8th. We've said Ferrari have phenomenal one-lap pace. If they can get that package together, I don't think Lewis has lost any talent. He's similar to Fernando. Fernando hasn't lost any talent. He's 42. So I kind of see it as a win-win for him. If Mercedes turn up with a title challenging car this year, maybe he could finish off that journey with them in the most amazing way. And if not, just imagine
going to Ferrari.
The
first title for so many years.
Since 2007.
Yeah.
So either way, it's a massive story. People can talk about reasons for decisions and contracts all they like. He's already made Ferrari more money than they're going to be paying him in just the announcement day. So, I think you mentioned, I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something. I think 2025 is going to be such a huge year. I mean,
bonkers.
We all know that this season is going to be good, but I feel like it's a bit of a placeholder this season because
prelude.
It really is. I mean, we've had lots of changes to the car names. We've got Stake and we've got the cash card, whatever it's bloody called, coming in, the Visa debit,
Capital One Visa.
Yeah, the Visa debit card or whatever.
Chip and pin.
Yeah, it's just absolutely wild. But then of course we're going to get we're going to have Audi enter the ring. We still don't know what's going on with Andretti. And I think it's going to be super exciting. Carlos Sainz will be a big moving part. I've always felt he probably will end up at Audi.
Sure.
What will happen, I guess, in terms of McLaren, who's going to take the second seat at Red Bull, because we all think that Checo will probably not have that seat come 25.
No.
So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts that's going to happen for next season. Next season.
Well, I think you're right. I think that even this season and next season, I think it's been mentioned in previous episodes that was it 14 drivers that were out of contract at the end of the year. You then throw in the move that nobody expected in those top 3 teams, and all of a sudden you're going to have 6 to 8 drivers fighting not only for that contract extension, but which seat can I get?
Yeah. So. And also, I guess there's some really talented drivers that are also coming up through F2, and you want to see these drivers be given a chance, not just the odd one lap here and there, or whether they have to fill in. So it's a very big season, I think, for the current drivers on the grid. Very big season.
I think to actually just on your point there around, we'd love to see that emerging talent coming into Formula One. It's great to see those that have joined are competitive and exciting, and we want to see them continue their careers. But equally, we want to see people coming through. If you're a champion of Formula 2, your goal then is to be in a Formula 1 seat.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can be a champion in F2 and
it falls away.
Be nowhere.
Yeah.
And then you're sort of branching out into GT seats or into Formula E.
But you get such a small window to do well.
Which is, and again, it's a very tight window to be involved in motorsport and at the top of your game. But I think this is where I don't understand the Andretti decision. F1 of a couple of decades ago, there were 13 teams, 26 cars. I'm not a believer in that the entertainment or the commercial aspects are too difficult to negotiate. I think it's probably an element of benefit sharing that we don't want to spread, but then that dilutes the sport for me anyway. I think it dilutes the sport, it dilutes the opportunities that we were talking about earlier for younger drivers,
because it's such a small enclosed grid and 20
seats.
That's it. 20 seats. But who knows, the Andretti thing, I feel like it might come up again. It's probably going to rear its head, but I think that they probably feel that where do you draw the line? Then if we say, okay, let's have 22, then is there going to be another one that says, okay, then it'll be 24?
Well, I mean, you've got to
change the circuits to a point, the garages.
Maybe. I mean, Monaco used to have, I'm pretty sure that had 26 cars. That's probably the tightest circuit on the calendar.
That's the worst circuit to have it, yeah.
The cars are very different, granted, to when they last sort of ran that many cars around there. But yeah, I still, for me, would like to see a few more teams. I mean, you're not going to get an unlimited supply of sports teams coming in, because you've got to be investing 150 to 200 million a year. Well, there's
an argument. There was a little conversation that went on that potentially Andretti would maybe buy out a current team. Haas being one. Haas being one, and that's something I think we'll look and see if anything materialises over the next season or so. But that would potentially be a way in, and the way that Haas have struggled, it might be time for Gene Haas to actually cash in, because the amount of money he's spending every time they bin it into a wall, I mean, he's not really getting anything back, is it? And now Gunter's not there, which was a massive moneymaker for Haas as well.
That was probably that's arguably one of the big, again, you forget there's been so many different shocks and controversies on the off-season this year, but, Gunter, what's interesting about Gunter, and he was quite open in his interview at the Autosport show around the situation. It wasn't really a closed interview, if you like. He was keen for Haas to invest more in the sport, whether that be the tipping point or whether it was Haas's performances over the last few years. I think only Gene will know. But if they want to continue in the sport, which there's questions over that, I think they need to do that. For me, the easiest thing for Andretti is to offer a check.
I think it probably will happen.
I think it's coming, definitely. To be honest.
All right, I just want to kind of wrap up this section before we talk about the Aston Martin car. Yeah. What are your predictions then for this coming season?
Oh, I think we're gonna see some entertaining races, because a lot of drivers are driving for their contracts and driving for their seats. I would probably hazard a guess that Red Bull are going to come out the blocks for incredibly quickly. I think they dialed their car down last year. They stopped development early. They've, Adrian Newey's, applied his genius again. I'd like to see Ferrari get more consistent behind their pace, because let's be honest, whoever wins a title, whoever you support, you want to see competitive racing. So as much as it was sheer dominance last year, entertainment factor, sport factor wasn't there. So prediction, Red Bull will probably go along and fight and get potentially Max's 4th title. But I think we'll see the likes of McLaren and Ferrari in the mix. Hopefully Mercedes too.
You didn't seem that confident on it.
Well, I think there's a lot thrown up in the air at Mercedes. They've already been quite vocal. Lewis is not going to be involved in development meetings anymore. You have to develop a car if you want to fight for a title. Is George ready to take that mantra yet? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
As much as he's got some raw speed, I don't think so. So we'll see.
Okay. Aston Martin, they have launched their AMR24. They launched it virtually this morning, and it's a strongly revised car from last season. The livery kind of retains that usual green colour that we love. There's something that a lot of the cars have now decided to go with, but this carbon fibre over the top. And this particular car has got these revised side pods, which a lot of the other cars also have.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about this carbon fibre thing, because is this to reduce the weight?
Yeah.
Does it really make that much difference painting a car?
Yeah, absolutely. So it might surprise many, but paint's heavy. If you're talking about cars that are being pushed, tenths of a second mean points. And in terms of hitting weight, paint can actually make that difference. You can have kilos of weight different in paint versus your carbon fibre, which is nice and lightweight.
It's a bit mental, because you would never think that.
No.
I mean, I can't imagine what it's going to look like on track when you just see all these different cars going around with carbon fibre, and nothing like glossy and sexy about the livery.
Yeah, I mean,
which is what part of F1 is. We love seeing the liveries.
For sure. I mean, aesthetically, it sucks because it's we're almost going through a gothic era of Formula One, in that everyone's
trying to compete as best as they can.
But I think it is the most cost-effective way to shed weight from your car. If you're not painting it, you're not having to develop other parts, you're not having to change other parts to reduce that weight. So, in not painting it, it's a cheap way to go, we'll save a couple of kilos.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see if it actually does work in principle.
Well, I think we've heard that one team are looking for a full paint livery, because they've managed to balance the weight elsewhere, which is Ferrari. So, and again, everybody loves the Ferrari red.
You have to have you can't have a carbon fibre car. Ferrari has to
fully
be
black. Ferrari just won't work.
No, you have to have a red Ferrari. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just not Ferrari. It just wouldn't work. Mike Crack, team principal of Aston, said, our goal this season is to score regular points, podiums, and fight for our first win in green. They were good last season. I think I remember it took us all by surprise, didn't it? Especially, in the opening few races.
Yeah.
And having Alonso there, he's got a fresh trim, he looked suave this morning.
The Alonso waves in his hair.
Oh yeah, he looked fresh and ready to go again,
Yeah.
and I love seeing him. I think he brings so much to F1 and the sport, and I think he's been incredible to what he's brought to Aston already. What do you think the real limit is, though? Do you think, obviously, they had a bit of an overachievement at the start of last season and finished about right, or?
Well, I mean, they took us all by surprise. They came out of the block so quickly in 23. And then their development sort of route was clearly not the right one. I think they actually reverted back to their first half of the season car towards the end of the season, and then immediately became more competitive.
There was a few of those cars last season that had all these upgrades, and then
it sent them
all off.
Sent them backwards.
It might have been Texas that they all put the upgrades on, and then they all took them straight back
Everybody
off.
failed.
Yeah.
So I mean, the only team that I could think of, especially towards the end of the season, that were improving were McLaren. What's the limit for Aston Martin? I think if they're able to start the season in the manner that they did last year, where they were competitive, and if they're able to get their development, I think podiums are for sure possible for Aston Martin. Can they secure their first win? If we're looking at the drivers, no offence to Lance, but it's only coming from one part of that garage.
Do you know what? I think that's the biggest problem with Aston, and you have to be a good driver to be on the grid. Let's
100%.
He gets a lot of stick, Lance Stroll, but he must be a good enough driver.
Oh, I mean, Lance is. If you look at Turkey 2020 or 21, he was phenomenal.
He'll have the odd race each season where he does really well, but it's just one.
Yeah.
But I think when you look at obviously the gulf in difference between Alonso and Stroll, it's so huge, and I think for Aston to be a really competitive team as they're developing the car, they are going to need a better driver in that second seat. But
sure.
will Lawrence get rid of Lance? It's
a big question, isn't it? I mean, there's arguments to say that Lance, is in Formula One because his dad.
Yeah, his dad brought the team.
His dad, when he was at Williams, a little bit different story, I guess, but again, heavy investment coming from the Stroll family. Now now his dad owns the team. You know, like you say, do you tell your son, no more Formula One for you? It depends on what Lawrence's ambition is. If Lawrence's ambition is to win a title and be a team owner, then, you know, he has to take that tough decision. I think being where he is, he's happy to take tough decisions. Can he do it to his son?
Take
For debate.
Take a lot of guts.
That would be a cold conversation with your son to say.
But you know what? Sometimes you need to have those cold conversations.
You're just not quick enough.
If you want to be a champion, you have to do that.
Yeah.
Just looking at the car in a little bit more depth, technical director Dan Fallows said the chassis design is new, as well as the nose, the front wing, the front suspension and the rear suspension. We want to compete in the development race this season, and this car is designed to do just that. And Fernando Alonso also noted that he is absolutely ready for his 21st season in F1. He said the whole team has worked flat out on getting the AMR24 ready for this new season. There are so many questions, though, still to face and answer in the first few races with testing. Of course, it can look great and we can all think it's going to be good, but the real time is when it is on the track and we are in that testing phase, isn't it?
For sure, yeah. I mean, I look, the Aston Martin livery is probably one of the more attractive. You know, the British racing green. It's a good-looking car, but cars don't win championships on being good-looking. So
unfortunately, not.
I think it's interesting that the way that they've you know, how they've launched the car and what their sort of key message is that they're setting the car up to compete on development. So, you know, have they recognised that last year that was probably a weakness of theirs, and maybe that they're giving this new car the opportunity to develop better. So yeah, it'll be interesting. And Fernando's keeping very coy in that message of let's do our talking on track.
Let's see what happens in testing before we get too excited.
Yeah.
There's been other car launches as well. Haas, they've gone from a much darker new livery, less red, more focus on black and white. The VF24 main focus and all the work on redesigning went into the side pods as well. That seems to be a theme that's actually running through everyone. Williams was the same. Again, a sleeker, smoother looking FW46 for 2024. The side pods were the main focus. Alex Albon actually also said that the car feels different in the simulator, but much better on the low speed corners compared to the last car. He says that he is going to probably have to adapt his driving style, though. Is that quite tough, though, for a driver who's comfortable in the car? And obviously he is the main driver, so the car is designed for him. But even so, he's not 100% comfortable in his own driving style in the new car. Is that difficult? Can that be a big disruptor for the start of the season?
I mean, it can be. I mean, the guys are going to be putting in huge amounts of time from now to the start of testing in the sims, and we should have, or the team should have, a good idea of how the sim sets up in relation to the car. Of course, you can never just take the sim data on face value. We've seen that with Mercedes. Mercedes thought they were going to be a second faster than the rest of the grid in 2022.
That worked out.
Boy, weren't they shocked. But is it hard for a driver to adapt? With time, he will do that. Whether he just decides to set up the car more akin to him, or if he gets more used to it. We've seen Alex in seats. When he was in Red Bull, that car was set up where he said it wasn't to my style. He still had some competitive races in it, so
he's a good driver. I think he's been a really good driver for Williams,
for sure.
And a lot of people obviously wrote him off after Red Bull, but coming into that second seat, it's so hard. Hard at Red Bull.
100%.
They feel Williams can challenge Alpine in terms of the midfield. But Alpine, again, they've had a lot of investment going. They've got all these NFL stars, football stars, etc., singers, boxers, everyone going to Alpine. And we feel like it's probably going to be the Wrexham of the grid. We're going to see lots of documentaries, I'm sure, in the next couple of years. But it's been a disappointing joint launch for kind of that car. They unveiled their A524 F1 car and A424 World Endurance car. That's a lot of AFs. And
I was going to a lot of abbreviations.
They did it simultaneously, and there's hints of blue on mostly a bare carbon body. So again, this is another one that's gone with the carbon. Change to the front wing and the side pod. They are going to run a pink livery though for 8 races this season as well. And the strokes of blue will be replaced by the pink. But again, I feel like Alpine, with the investments going in, I feel they're really underwhelming. I think this is going to be another kind of write-off season, and we're going to see them kick into action 25 because I feel the driver lineup will change.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting actually because Alpine's obviously come from the Renault, sort of when Renault were running. They were investing huge amounts of money. Their goal and ambition was to get back into a championship winning contention. and it's just not materialised.
Not
Like
at all.
in no way materialised.
Do you think it's the car, the drivers, or a bit both?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to say the drivers. I think Esteban Ocon through his junior formulas and when he came into F1, he's certainly a capable driver. He's shown signs of really good speed. And with Pierre, they're now again really solid driver. He had his stint at Red Bull. I think Red Bull were going through they are quite cutthroat, we know that as a constructor. I think it's got to be something more than the drivers. I think the car, the development, how they're sort of applying the car to the regulations, it's just not working.
Yeah. I think this season is going to be a bit of a learning curve for them. I really do.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I agree with Alex's comments. If if Williams, Williams are incredibly fast in a straight line. They've shown that. They've been really competitive towards the back end of last season. We saw it in Mexico. They weren't too bad from memory in Vegas. And if they can dial that car in on slower speed corners, maybe they'll have the package to really wipe the floor with that.
I hope so. I'd love to see Williams further up the grid. I mean,
100%.
They're just such an iconic team. They should never be down near the bottom.
No.
All right, best of the rest. We've got Stake, which is, formerly known as Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
Very wild direction change. They've now got a black and neon green livery on this season's car, the C44. Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu are confident in the new change. Bottas said it's the start of something new for the team. Don't forget, Stake will be called Kick, I believe, in countries.
A number of countries.
In a number of countries where you cannot gamble. So if you can keep up with that, it's Stake, and then it's hashtag as well.
Yeah.
Kick. And we've also got the V-Carb. What a ridiculous name that is.
Yeah, well, again, the commercial aspects and partnership aspects are sort of destroying.
V-Carb, I mean, it's just so stupid. I mean, arguably
Is this
the best
Visa
launch
credit
so far.
card, chip and pin?
Yes, the Visa debit car.
Yeah.
It launched in Vegas, a nice blue and red livery, very reminiscent of the 2017, 2019 Toro Rosso. Lots of change on the car again, following the trend reworks iPods. The team has stressed that the opportunity to become the Visa Cash App, RB, is one that allows them to essentially become a new team with the ambition to taking the best results possible in 2024.
It's almost as that was a strap line straight from Visa themselves, isn't it?
Can you take a car seriously or a team seriously if it's called the Visa Cash App?
No.
That's worse than Stake.
Quite simply, no.
That's terrible. I mean, it just sounds like a bank. It's just not okay.
No.
I mean, the only thing I would say is I guess they are part of the Red Bull group. They must get a couple hand-me-downs.
Yeah, well, I mean...
They could get the car.
Yeah, I think that, I'm kind of a little bit aligned to Zach Brown's view on it, actually. So it's quite clearly a second team of the Red Bull, of the sort of Red Bull manufacturer. And we've seen it in terms of how the teams cooperate with one another. Yes, of course, parts are shared, with the likes of Mercedes and Aston Martin and Williams, and you see the alignment in some of the setup, not just the engines. But yeah, for sure, Visa Cash App will be certainly cashing in on the relationship with Red Bull.
Oh, I like it very much.
That one's free.
Okay, so that is basically all the launches.
Yeah.
Who do you think could be a bit of a surprise this season? Is there anyone? We talked about the top end of the grid, but who are you looking out for in terms of that mid pack or a late runner, late challenger?
Driver or
both driver and car really.
I think, we kind of talked about that. I don't think we can classify Williams as the top teams anymore. Again, huge history in Formula One. I'd be looking very closely at Alex and Williams. I think they can take that car to the midfield. They might even spring a surprise and go further up, especially if they've sort of developed that car in the right way over winter. So I'll definitely be keeping a watch on Williams. In terms of drivers, McLaren are kind of at the nose end. But Piastri really impressed me in his first season.
He was great.
He was incredibly calm, very collected, but had a real raw pace about him. He doesn't beat himself up. He seems to learn from mistakes. And I think he's going to push Lando this year. I really do. And of course, I back all the Brits, but I think Piastri would be one to watch too.
Yeah, I like that. Definitely agree. Well, thank you very much, Steve. It's been lovely getting to chat to you and kind of get your take on things. What's next for you? Where can we see you next? What's your plan for this season?
Well, plans for this season. So be racing in 2 BRSEC series. So the Super Sport Championship with Pure Track Racing, and again out with them with Club Sport. So last year for me was a little bit of a challenge. My car was written off pretty much for the year and spent a lot of time having fixes and corrections and stuff done, but we'll be back on track this year for the whole season.
Love it.
Fingers crossed. Exactly.
Nice.
I'm just coming out of them the last 5 minutes, aren't I? So yeah, no, season starts for us on the 16th and 17th of March. And then from there, like we mentioned earlier, ambitions, it's incredibly difficult, especially at sort of this period of time. But really to build some partners and go for potential future pro seats. Maybe Pro-Am in terms of GT, or looking at British Touring Car as a privateer team. So
world's your oyster.
Well, exactly. It's just a very difficult oyster to crack.
But it's still an oyster. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this morning's episode. Please make sure you go and like and subscribe as well to On Track GP. We very much appreciate it. And we will see you again next week. See you later.